Jake Hoffman stared out the wide window of the transport ship and watched the stars blur past. He had left Earth 3 weeks ago, and now he was almost at his destination. Horizon's Edge, they called it. A massive research station floating in the middle of nowhere, where aliens from dozens of worlds came together to study and learn about each other. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and took a deep breath. This was it. This was what he had worked toward for 5 years. A chance to prove that humans belonged out here among the stars. A chance to show that Earth's newest members of the Galactic Council were not just another weak species trying to survive in a dangerous universe. The pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. They would dock in 10 minutes. Jake grabbed his bag and made his way to the exit port. Through the window, he could see Horizon's Edge growing larger. The station was enormous, bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. Rings of metal and glass spiraled around a central core, and thousands of lights blinked across its surface like stars. The transport ship shuddered as it connected to the docking port. Jake felt his stomach flip. This was real. He was really here. The door slid open with a hiss and Jake stepped into the station. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, but with a strange metallic tang. The corridor stretched ahead of him, wide enough for 10 people to walk side by side. Aliens moved past him in both directions. Tall ones, short ones, ones with too many arms, ones that floated instead of walked. Jake tried not to stare, but it was impossible. He had seen videos and pictures back on Earth, but seeing real aliens up close was something else entirely. A blue-skinned creature with 4 eyes glanced at him as it passed. Jake nodded politely, and the alien made a clicking sound that might have been a greeting. Or maybe it was laughing at him. He had no way to know. He followed the signs to the human section of the station. Commander Harris was supposed to meet him there. Jake had never met the commander in person, but he had heard stories. Harris was a legend among the human Space Corps. He had been one of the first humans to make contact with alien species, and he had survived more dangerous situations than most people could imagine. The human section was smaller than Jake expected. Just a few rooms and offices clustered together in one corner of the massive station. He found the main office and pressed the button beside the door. The door opened and a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes looked down at him. Commander Harris. The man was in his 50s with a face that had seen too much sun and too many battles. But his eyes were kind, and when he smiled, Jake felt some of his nervousness fade away. "Come in, Hoffman," the commander said. His voice was rough like gravel. Jake stepped inside and the door slid shut behind him. The office was plain. A desk, a few chairs, and a large screen on one wall showing a star map. Commander Harris sat down behind the desk and motioned for Jake to take a seat. "I read your file," Harris said. "Top of your class in xenobiology. Volunteer work with dangerous animals back on Earth. Impressive." "Thank you, sir," Jake said. He tried to sound confident, but his voice came out a little too high. Harris leaned back in his chair and studied Jake for a moment. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. Jake nodded. "To participate in the Interspecies Compatibility Program, to help build relationships between humans and other species. That's the official answer," Harris said. "But let me tell you what it really means. You're here to do something that most species in this galaxy think is impossible. You're here to prove that humans have something special, something that makes us different from everyone else out here." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" he asked. Harris stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the station, at all the different species moving through the corridors. "Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved as either predators or prey," he said. "They see the world in simple terms. Hunt or be hunted. Dominate or submit. They can barely work together within their own species, let alone with others." He turned back to Jake. "But humans are different. We evolved as both predators and prey. We hunted, but we were also hunted. We learned to work together, to form groups, to trust each other even when it didn't make sense. And more than that, we learned to trust other species. We took wolves into our homes and made them our friends. We kept big cats and dangerous reptiles as pets. We formed bonds with creatures that should have killed us." Jake listened, his heart beating faster. He had never thought about it that way before. "That's humanity's secret weapon," Harris continued. "We can form pack bonds across species lines. We can look at a dangerous predator and see a potential friend instead of an enemy, and that terrifies most of the galaxy. Because they don't understand it. They think it's madness. So what do you want me to do?" Jake asked. Harris smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. Tomorrow, there's going to be an orientation session. They'll explain the compatibility program and ask for volunteers. I want you to raise your hand. Jake swallowed hard. What species will I be working with? Vrexians, Harris said simply. The word hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He had heard of Vrexians. Everyone had. They were the most feared predators in the galaxy. Massive reptilian creatures from a high-gravity world, built for hunting and killing. Most species refused to even be in the same room as a Vrexian. The idea of working with one, of forming a bond with one, seemed insane. Sir, I don't know if I'm ready for that, Jake said quietly. Harris walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked Jake straight in the eyes. I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't think you could do it, he said. You have the skills. You have the temperament. And more importantly, you have something that most people don't have. You understand predators. You respect them. You don't fear them the way others do. Jake thought about his childhood growing up on a farm outside of Denver. His father had kept large dogs, German shepherds and Rottweilers that most people were afraid of. But Jake had never been afraid. He had learned to read their body language, to understand what they were feeling, to earn their trust. Later in university, he had worked with big cats and crocodiles, studying their behavior and learning how to handle them safely. Maybe Harris was right. Maybe he could do this. What happens if I fail? Jake asked. Harris shrugged. Then we try again with someone else. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to surprise a lot of people, Hoffman. Jake stood up. His legs felt shaky, but his mind was made up. All right, he said. I'll do it. Harris grinned. Good, get some rest tonight. Tomorrow is going to be interesting. Jake left the office and made his way to his assigned quarters. The room was small but comfortable, with a bed, a desk, and another window looking out at the stars. He sat on the bed and tried to calm his racing thoughts. He pulled out his tablet and started researching Vrexians. The more he read, the more nervous he became. Vrexians were apex predators, evolved on a world where only the strongest survived. They had sharp claws, powerful jaws, and scales that could stop most weapons. They communicated through growls and body language, and their society was built on strict hierarchies of dominance. No species had ever successfully bonded with a Vrexian outside of their own kind. Several had tried. Most had been injured. A few had died. Jake set the tablet aside and lay back on the bed. What had he gotten himself into? But even as doubt crept through his mind, another feeling grew stronger. Excitement. This was why he had come to space, not to play it safe but to push boundaries, to prove that humans could do things that others thought impossible. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But sleep was a long time coming. Tomorrow would change everything one way or another. The morning came too quickly. Jake woke to the sound of his alarm and dragged himself out of bed. His body felt heavy, like he had barely slept at all. He showered, dressed in his uniform, and tried to eat breakfast, but his stomach was too tight to accept much food. At 9 o'clock, he made his way to the main assembly hall. The room was massive, with rows of seats facing a large stage. Aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the seats, and Jake found a spot near the back. He recognized a few other humans scattered throughout the crowd. One of them, a woman with short dark hair, caught his eye and nodded. Jake nodded back. The lights dimmed and a tall alien with purple skin walked onto the stage. It spoke in a language Jake didn't recognize, but his translator earpiece quickly converted the words into English. "Welcome to Horizon's Edge," the alien said. Its voice was smooth and melodic. "You are here because you represent the best of your species. You have been chosen to participate in the Interspecies Compatibility Program, an initiative designed to foster cooperation and understanding between different races." The alien went on to explain how the program worked. Participants would be paired with members of other species and would work together on various tasks and exercises. The goal was to build trust and find common ground despite vast differences in biology, culture, and communication. "But I must be honest with you," the alien continued. "This program has a high rate of failure, particularly when working with predator species. Some partnerships will not work. Some may result in conflict or injury. We have medical staff on standby, and all sessions are carefully monitored. However, there are risks." A murmur went through the crowd. Jake felt his heart start to pound. We are particularly in need of volunteers to work with our Vrexian participants, the alien said. The Vrexians are a proud and powerful species, but they have proven difficult to pair with other races. In the history of this program, there has never been a successful bonding between a Vrexian and a non-Vrexian species. The room went silent. Jake looked around and saw fear on many faces. He understood why. The Vrexians had a reputation. They were not cruel, but they were dangerous. Their instincts were too strong, their need for dominance too ingrained. If anyone wishes to volunteer for this assignment, please raise your hand now, the alien said. Jake's hand went up before his brain could stop it. He felt everyone's eyes turn toward him. The woman with short dark hair was staring at him like he had lost his mind. Commander Harris, standing at the side of the room, gave him a small nod of approval. The purple alien looked surprised. We have one volunteer. The human delegate, Jake Hoffman. Are there any others? Silence. No one else moved. Very well, the alien said. Mr. Hoffman, please remain after this session for further instructions. The rest of the orientation passed in a blur. Jake barely heard what was being said. His mind was racing with thoughts of what he had just committed to. When the session finally ended, the other participants filed out of the room, many of them glancing at Jake with a mixture of pity and curiosity. The woman with short dark hair walked over to him. She had green eyes and a concerned expression. Are you crazy? She asked. Probably, Jake said with a weak smile. She shook her head. I'm Katie Morgan. I'm part of the human science team here, and I think you just made the worst decision of your life. Nice to meet you too, Jake said. Katie sighed. Look, I've been here for 6 months. I've seen what happens when species try to work with Vrexians. It doesn't end well. The best case scenario is that they ignore you completely. The worst case is that they see you as prey. I'll be careful, Jake said. Careful isn't enough, Katie said. These aren't like the animals back on Earth. They're intelligent, but they're also driven by instincts we can barely understand. You can't just walk up to a Vrexian and expect it to be friendly. Commander Harris approached them before Jake could respond. Morgan, Harris said with a nod. I see you've met our volunteer. Katie turned to face the commander. Sir, with all respect, this is a terrible idea. The failure rate for Vrexian pairings is 100%. Sending Hoffman in there is just going to get him hurt. Harris crossed his arms. I appreciate your concern. But Hoffman knew the risks when he volunteered. And I believe he has a better chance than you think. Based on what? Katie demanded. Based on the fact that he's human, Harris said simply. Now, if you'll excuse us, Hoffman has training to attend. Katie looked at Jake one more time. Be careful, she said quietly. Then she walked away. Harris led Jake out of the assembly hall and down a series of corridors. They eventually reached a training facility, a large room with padded floors and walls covered in screens showing various alien species. For the next 3 hours, Jake received intensive instruction on Vrexian behavior. He learned how they communicated through body language, how their social hierarchies worked, how to recognize signs of aggression versus curiosity. The instructors were experts, but even they seemed doubtful about his chances. Vrexians respect strength, one instructor explained. But not physical strength alone. They respect confidence, authority. If you show fear, they will sense it immediately and see you as weak. But if you show too much aggression, they will take it as a challenge and respond with violence. So what do I do? Jake asked. The instructor, a small gray alien with large eyes, tilted its head. You find balance. You show that you are not prey, but also not a threat. You demonstrate respect without submission. It is a delicate dance, and very few species can manage it. Jake practiced interpreting Vrexian body language through videos and simulations. He learned that a low rumble could mean many different things depending on the pitch and context. He learned that direct eye contact was acceptable for brief moments, but staring was a challenge. He learned that approaching from the side was less threatening than approaching head-on. By the end of the day, his head was spinning with information. He felt like he was preparing for the most important exam of his life, except the consequences of failure were much worse than a bad grade. Harris found him in the training room after the instructors had left. How are you feeling? The commander asked. Terrified, Jake admitted. Good, Harris said. Fear keeps you alert. Just don't let it control you. When do I meet the Vrexian? Jake asked. Tomorrow morning, Harris said. His name is Scar. He's young for a Vrexian, only about 5 years old, but that still makes him fully mature and extremely dangerous. He's been in the program for 2 months, and every species we've paired him with has failed. What happened to them? Jake asked. Nothing permanent, Harris said. Scar isn't violent for the sake of violence, but he doesn't accept partnerships. He remains isolated, aggressive, unwilling to cooperate. The program coordinators are close to sending him back to his homeworld. This is his last chance and my last chance too, Jake said quietly. Harris smiled. Get some rest, Hoffman. Tomorrow you're going to make history. That night, Jake lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about everything he had learned, everything he had trained for. He thought about the dogs and big cats he had worked with on Earth, how he had learned to read their moods and earn their trust. This would be different, he knew. Scar wasn't just an animal. He was intelligent, complex, driven by instincts and emotions that Jake could barely imagine. But maybe that was the key. Maybe the fact that Scar was more than just an animal meant that there was more to connect with, more ways to build a bridge between two very different beings. Jake closed his eyes and tried to calm his racing heart. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. All he could do was trust his training and hope that humanity's ancient talent for befriending predators would be enough. The observation hall was crowded when Jake arrived. Aliens from dozens of species lined the walls, watching through reinforced glass as other participants met their assigned partners. Jake saw a small blue creature cautiously approaching a tall insect-like alien. He saw a floating jellyfish thing trying to communicate with something that looked like a walking tree. Some interactions seemed to be going well, others not so much. Commander Harris stood near the control panel talking quietly with the program coordinators. Katie Morgan was there too, her arms crossed and her face worried. When she saw Jake, she walked over to him. Last chance to back out, she said. Jake shook his head. I'm doing this. Katie looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she just sighed. Then good luck. You're going to need it. A voice called out over the speakers. Jake Hoffman, please proceed to Preparation Chamber 3. This was it. Jake walked toward the door marked with a large number 3. His legs felt weak, but he kept moving. The door slid open and he stepped into a small room. The walls were white and bare except for another door on the opposite side. Through a window he could see the bonding chamber beyond. And there, pacing back and forth inside the chamber, was Scar. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had seen pictures and videos, but nothing prepared him for the reality. Scar was massive, easily 8 feet tall and covered in dark scales that gleamed like polished stone. His body was built for power, thick muscles moving under that armored skin. Long claws scraped against the floor as he walked, and his tail swished behind him like a weapon. But it was Scar's eyes that held Jake's attention. They glowed with an amber light, intelligent and alert, tracking everything in the room with predatory focus. Commander Harris's voice came through a speaker in the wall. Whenever you're ready, Hoffman. The door will unlock. You'll have 30 minutes for this first session. If at any point we see signs of danger, we'll pull you out immediately. Jake took a deep breath. He thought about everything he had learned. Confidence without aggression, respect without submission. Show that you are not prey but also not a threat. I'm ready, he said. Through the window, he saw Commander Harris nod to one of the coordinators. Then Harris did something strange. He grinned, that same knowing smile Jake had seen before. And then the commander pressed a button, and the door sealed with a heavy mechanical sound that echoed through the chamber. The inner door slid open. Jake stepped through, and the door closed behind him with a soft hiss. He was alone in the chamber with Scar. The Vrexian stopped pacing immediately. His head swung toward Jake, and those amber eyes locked onto him. A low rumble filled the room so deep that Jake felt it in his chest. It was not quite a growl, more like a question. Who are you and what do you want? Jake stood still. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to press himself against the door and beg to be let out. But he fought down the fear and kept his breathing steady. He looked at Scar, meeting those glowing eyes for just a moment before looking away. Not submission, just respect. Scar took a step forward, then another. He was huge up close, towering over Jake like a mountain of muscle and scales. Jake could smell him now, a sharp scent like hot metal and earth. The Vrexian circled him slowly, studying him from every angle. Jake remained perfectly still. He let Scar look, let him learn. This was how predators worked. They assessed threats and determined whether something was food, danger, or neither. Jake needed to be neither. Minutes passed. Scar completed his circle and came around to face Jake head-on. The rumbling grew louder. In the observation room, Jake knew people were watching with held breath, waiting to see if this would be another failure, another injury, another proof that Vrexians could not be partnered. But something changed in Scar's posture. The aggressive tension eased slightly. His tail stopped lashing. He tilted his head to one side and the rumble shifted to a different pitch. Curiosity instead of threat, Jake saw his chance. Moving very slowly, he extended one hand, palm down, fingers relaxed, not reaching out to touch, just offering, showing that he was willing to connect but letting Scar make the choice. Scar stared at the hand. Then he lowered his massive head and moved closer. Jake felt his heart hammering but kept his hand steady. The Vrexian snout was inches away now, close enough that Jake could feel the heat of his breath. Then Scar made a sound Jake had never heard in any of the training videos. It was soft, almost a chirp mixed with that deep rumble. And slowly, carefully he pressed his scaled snout against Jake's palm. Jake's breath came out in a rush. The scales were warm and smooth under his fingers. He could feel the power in the creature before him, the strength that could tear him apart in seconds. But there was also something else. A kind of gentleness, a willingness to trust. "Good boy," Jake whispered, using the same soft tone he had used with dogs and big cats back on Earth. The words meant nothing to Scar, but the tone did. It said, "I see you. I respect you. I am not afraid of you, but I do not wish you harm." Scar's eyes half closed. He made that chirping sound again, this time with a note of something that might have been pleasure. Jake moved his hand slowly, running it along the side of Scar's head, feeling the texture of the scales change from rough to smooth. Then, moving with surprising grace for such a large creature, Scar sat down. Just lowered himself to the floor and sat there, watching Jake with those intelligent amber eyes. Jake understood the invitation. Slowly he sat down too, not right next to Scar, but close enough to show that he was willing to be near, to share space. For a long moment they just sat there. A human and a Vrexian, two beings from completely different worlds, sharing a quiet moment of connection. Then Scar shifted his weight and moved closer. His tail, which had been held stiffly behind him, now curved around until it touched Jake's side. Not threatening, not aggressive, protective. In the observation room, chaos erupted. Jake couldn't hear it through the thick walls, but he could imagine it. Aliens shouting in confusion, scientists scrambling to understand what they were seeing. Katie probably looking like she might faint. Commander Harris would be grinning. Jake was sure of it. Jake leaned back slightly, letting himself relax against Scar's side. The Vrexian was warm, his body heat radiating like a furnace. Jake could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, the slow rise and fall of that massive chest. "You're not so scary," Jake said quietly. "You just needed someone who understood you." Scar rumbled again, but this time it was clearly a sound of contentment. His eyes closed fully, and his head lowered to rest on his front claws. Jake stayed where he was, one hand resting on Scar's scales, feeling the alien heartbeat beneath his palm. He thought about what Commander Harris had said. Humans had a gift that other species lacked. They could look at a predator and see not an enemy, but a potential friend. They could form bonds across impossible divides. For thousands of years, humans had lived alongside wolves that became dogs. They had kept big cats and birds of prey. They had formed partnerships with creatures that should have killed them. And now, here in the stars, that ancient talent was proving itself again. The 30 minutes passed quickly. When the speaker crackled to life, announcing that the session was over, Jake felt a pang of disappointment. He didn't want to leave. He had just started to understand Scar, to see past the fearsome exterior to the intelligent being beneath. Scar seemed to feel the same way. When Jake stood up, the Vrexian made a low questioning sound. Jake placed his hand on Scar's head one more time. "I'll come back," Jake promised. "Tomorrow. We'll do this again." He walked to the door, and it slid open. Before stepping through, he looked back. Scar was watching him, those amber eyes bright and focused. Jake raised one hand in farewell, and Scar tilted his head in what might have been acknowledgement. Jake stepped through the door, and it sealed behind him. He leaned against the wall, his whole body shaking with released tension and adrenaline. He had done it. He had actually done it. The outer door opened, and suddenly Jake was surrounded. Aliens speaking in dozens of languages, scientists with recording devices, and Katie pushing through the crowd with tears in her eyes. "You're insane," she said, but she was smiling. That was incredible. No one has ever done that before. Commander Harris appeared calm and satisfied. "Well done, Hoffman," he said simply. "But this is just the beginning. You've proven it can be done. Now comes the hard part." "What hard part?" Jake asked. Harris's grin widened, convincing the rest of the galaxy that this wasn't just luck. News of Jake's success spread through the station like wildfire. Within hours, every species in Horizon's Edge knew that a human had bonded with a Vrexian. By the next day, the story had reached the Galactic Council itself. Jake became an instant celebrity, though he wasn't sure he liked the attention. He returned to the bonding chamber every day for a week. Each session with Scar went better than the last. They developed a kind of communication that went beyond words. Jake learned to read Scar's body language perfectly, understanding when the Vrexian was playful, when he was serious, when he needed space. And Scar, in turn, seemed to understand Jake's moods and intentions with uncanny accuracy. On the 8th day, Commander Harris called Jake to his office. When Jake arrived, he found Harris standing with 3 other aliens Jake didn't recognize. They were tall and powerfully built, with the same scaled appearance as Scar, but larger and covered in old scars. Vrexians, adult Vrexians. Jake swallowed hard. Up close, they were even more intimidating than Scar had been that first day. "These are delegates from the Vrexian High Council," Harris explained. "They've come to see you." The largest of the 3 Vrexians stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that Jake's translator struggled to convert. "You are the human who claims to have bonded with one of our young." Jake forced himself to stand straight and meet the Vrexian's eyes briefly before looking away. "I don't claim anything. Scar and I have formed a connection, yes." The Vrexian made a sound that might have been skepticism. "Many species have tried to work with our kind. All have failed. What makes you different?" Jake thought about how to answer. "Because I didn't see Scar as a monster or a tool. I saw him as an individual worthy of respect." The 3 Vrexians exchanged glances. Then the leader spoke again. "We have come to issue a challenge. If your connection with Scar is genuine, you will prove it by entering a chamber with 3 of our warriors. If you can demonstrate the same bond with them, we will acknowledge that humans possess a unique gift. If you fail, humanity's claim to special status will be dismissed as fraud." Jake felt his stomach drop. 3 adult Vrexians. Warriors. This was far more dangerous than working with young Scar. Commander Harris stepped forward. "With respect, this test seems designed to fail. Hoffman has worked with 1 Vrexian over multiple sessions. You're asking him to replicate that success with 3 strangers in a single meeting." The Vrexian leader's eyes gleamed. "If the human ability is as special as you claim, he should be able to demonstrate it under any circumstances. Unless you believe it was merely luck?" Jake looked at Harris, then back at the Vrexian delegates. He understood what was happening here. This was a test not just of him, but of humanity's place in galactic society. If he refused, it would look like weakness. If he failed, it would damage Earth's reputation for years to come. "I'll do it," Jake said quietly. Harris turned to him sharply. "Hoffman, you don't have to agree to this." "Yes, I do," Jake said. "If I don't, everything we've accomplished means nothing. Everyone will think Scar and I were just a fluke." The Vrexian leader nodded slowly. "You have courage, human. The trial will take place tomorrow at midday. Prepare yourself." After the Vrexians left, Harris poured himself a drink and offered one to Jake. Jake shook his head. His hands were trembling too much to hold a glass. "You know this is dangerous," Harris said. "These won't be like Scar. They're battle-hardened warriors who have spent their lives fighting and competing. They won't be gentle or patient." "I know," Jake said, "but you told me humanity's future depends on this, on proving we can bridge gaps that others can't. If I back down now, what does that say about us?" Harris studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled that knowing smile again. "You really are the right person for this, Hoffman. I knew it the moment I read your file." Jake spent the rest of the day with Scar. He didn't tell the Vrexian what was going to happen tomorrow, but somehow Scar seemed to sense his tension. The young Vrexian stayed close, making those soft rumbling sounds that Jake had learned meant comfort and reassurance. That evening, Katie found Jake in the observation room, watching Scar through the glass. She sat down beside him without saying anything at first, I heard about the challenge, she finally said. Jake nodded but didn't look away from Scar. You don't have to do this, Katie said. No one would blame you for refusing. Yes, they would, Jake said quietly, and they'd be right to. This is bigger than me. It's about proving that humans have something valuable to offer the galaxy. Katie was silent for a moment. Then she asked, What's your secret? How did you get Scar to trust you when everyone else failed? Jake thought about it. I didn't try to dominate him or control him. I just tried to understand him, to see things from his perspective. And I wasn't afraid, not really. I grew up around big dogs and worked with predators my whole life. I learned early on that if you respect them, if you show them you're not a threat but also not prey, they'll give you a chance. That's a human thing, Katie said. Most species either fear predators or try to dominate them. We're the only ones who befriend them. That's what Commander Harris said, Jake replied. He called it humanity's secret weapon. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching Scar sleep in his chamber. Finally, Katie stood up. Get some rest, Jake. You're going to need it tomorrow. But Jake didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. He thought about his childhood on the farm, learning to read the body language of dogs and horses. He thought about his studies in university, working with big cats and crocodiles. Every experience had prepared him for this. Humans had spent thousands of years learning to live alongside predators. They had taken wolves into their homes and made them companions. They had befriended creatures that could kill them with a single bite. That ancient skill, that willingness to see past fangs and claws to the intelligent being beneath, was now being tested on a galactic stage. When morning came, Jake felt strangely calm. The fear was still there, but it was manageable now. He showered, dressed, and made his way to the trial chamber. A crowd had already gathered. It seemed like every species on the station wanted to witness this. The 3 Vrexian warriors stood in the observation area. They were even larger than Jake remembered, covered in scars that told stories of countless battles. Their eyes tracked him as he entered, assessing, judging. Commander Harris pulled Jake aside one last time. Remember everything you learned with Scar, he said quietly. But more than that, remember why you're here. You're not trying to prove you're the strongest or the smartest. You're proving that humans can build bridges where others see only walls. Jake nodded. The announcement came over the speakers. Jake Hoffman, proceed to the trial chamber. Jake walked to the entrance. Through the glass, he could see the 3 Vrexian warriors already inside, waiting. They looked ready for a fight, their bodies tense and alert. The door slid open. Jake took one last deep breath and stepped inside. Behind him, he heard the door seal shut with that heavy mechanical sound. He was alone with 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. Time to prove that humanity's ancient gift was more than just luck. A young human woman entered a chamber where a massive predator waited. Something that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard. The creature snarled, showing teeth the size of knives. The woman stood her ground, extending her hand slowly, confidently. The predator paused, studying her. Then slowly it approached. Katie shook her head in wonder. I still can't believe this works. That humans can just walk up to the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy and make friends with them. Commander Harris chuckled. We've been doing it for thousands of years. We took wolves into our camps and made them dogs. We kept big cats as companions. We partnered with birds of prey. Every other species in the galaxy sees predators as threats to be avoided or enemies to be fought. Only, the chamber was larger than the one Jake had worked in with Scar. It needed to be, to accommodate 3 massive Vrexian warriors. They stood spread out across the space, forming a loose triangle with Jake in the middle. Their amber eyes glowed in the artificial light, and their claws scraped against the metal floor. Jake forced himself to breathe normally. In the observation room, dozens of aliens watched through reinforced glass. He could feel their eyes on him, their doubt, their certainty that he would fail. Even Katie looked terrified, her hands pressed against the window. The largest Vrexian, the one who had spoken in Commander Harris's office, took a step forward. His movement was predatory, testing, watching to see how Jake would react. The other 2 mirrored him, closing the triangle tighter. Jake didn't move. He stood his ground, feet planted, shoulders relaxed. Not aggressive, not submissive. Just present. He met each warrior's eyes briefly, acknowledging them, then looked away. A sign of respect in Vrexian culture, not weakness. The warriors circled him, their massive bodies moving with surprising grace. Jake turned slowly, keeping all three in his field of vision. He could smell them now, that hot metal scent mixed with something sharper, more dangerous. These were not like Scar. They were older, harder, shaped by battle and survival. One of the warriors, scarred and battle-worn, suddenly charged forward with a mock attack. It was a test, Jake realized, seeing if he would panic, if he would run or freeze. Jake held his ground. At the last second, he shifted his weight slightly, angling his body to the side. Not a retreat, just a repositioning. The warrior stopped just short of him, so close that Jake could feel the heat radiating from his scales. The Vrexian rumbled, a sound of surprise. Then Jake did something that made the entire observation room gasp. He spoke in the Vrexian language, his pronunciation rough but understandable. "I mean no challenge to your strength, warriors. I seek only understanding between us." The three Vrexians froze. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the leader tilted his head, studying Jake with new interest. "You speak our tongue," he rumbled back in Vrexian. "Poorly," Jake admitted, still in their language. "But I try. To understand your people, I must learn your words." The second warrior, smaller but covered in more scars than the others, approached from a different angle. He circled Jake slowly, examining him. Then he spoke, and Jake's translator picked up the words. "You are small, weak. What makes you think you can walk among warriors?" Jake turned to face him. "Because strength is not only in the body," he said. "It is in the mind. In the willingness to face fear and not let it control you." The third warrior made a sound that might have been approval or mockery. "You speak well for prey. I am not prey," Jake said firmly. He met the warrior's eyes and held them longer this time. "I am human, and humans do not see predators as enemies. We see them as equals." The leader moved closer, towering over Jake. His claws flexed, scraping against the floor. "You claim equality with us? With Vrexians who have hunted and fought since before your species left your world?" Jake didn't flinch. "Not equality in strength or skill. Equality in worth, in dignity. I respect what you are, and I ask only that you see me for what I am." The leader's eyes narrowed. "And what are you, human?" Jake thought about everything Commander Harris had told him. About humanity's history with predators. About the ancient bond between humans and wolves. About the countless species humans had befriended when others would have fled or fought. "I am a bridge," Jake said simply. "My people learned long ago to walk beside predators, to see past fangs and claws to the intelligence and honor beneath. We have always found ways to connect with those that others fear." The three warriors exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some silent communication that Jake couldn't interpret. Then slowly the leader sat down, just lowered himself to the floor as Scar had done that first day. "Show us," the leader said. "Show us this bridge you speak of." Jake moved carefully. He approached the seated warrior and, remembering what had worked with Scar, extended his hand palm down. The leader watched it for a moment, then slowly brought his massive head forward. His scaled snout touched Jake's palm, and Jake felt that same warmth, that same connection he had felt with Scar. "You are called Croth," Jake said, guessing from the scars and bearing that this was a veteran of many battles. "I honor your strength and your experience." The warrior's eyes closed briefly. "You know my name?" "I was told of the three warriors who would test me," Jake said. "Croth the Unbowed, Raise the Swift, Thex the Enduring. You are legends among your people." The other two warriors moved closer. Raise, the smaller scarred one, made a sound of interest. "You studied us, of course," Jake said. "To walk beside warriors, one must understand them." Thex, the third warrior, sat down as well. His tail swished behind him, not in agitation but in thought. "We came here expecting failure," he said. "Expecting another weak species trying to prove itself through trickery or technology." "I have no tricks," Jake said. "Only respect and a willingness to learn." Raise approached and sniffed at Jake much as Scar had done. "But you do not fear us." "Why?" Jake smiled slightly. "Because I understand predators. I grew up with them. My species has walked beside wolves for tens of thousands of years. We have kept great cats in our homes. We have learned that those with the greatest strength can also show the greatest restraint." Croth made a deep rumbling sound that Jake had learned meant contemplation. "Wolves. We know of them. Your people took apex predators and made them companions. Made them family." "Yes," Jake said, "and in doing so both species became stronger. The wolves gave us their loyalty and hunting skill. We gave them our protection and companionship. It was not domination. It was partnership. A long silence followed. Then Croth stood and moved to sit beside Jake, just as Scar did every day. Reyes and Thex followed, positioning themselves on either side. 3 of the galaxy's most fearsome warriors, sitting peacefully beside a human who barely reached their shoulders. In the observation room, Jake could hear muffled sounds of amazement. Species who had never successfully worked with Vrexians were witnessing something impossible. The Vrexian High Council delegates stood silent, their expressions unreadable. "Tell us of your pack," Croth said after a while. The one called Scar, Jake smiled. "He is young but wise, curious and brave. He was alone before we met, I think, isolated because others could not see past what he is to who he is, as are all of our young sent to this place," Thex rumbled. "We send them hoping they will learn to work with other species, but always they return having failed." "Not anymore," Jake said. "Scar and I have formed something real, and if humans can do this with Vrexians, we can do it with any species willing to try." Reyes tilted his head. "Your commander said humans are bridge builders. We did not understand what he meant. Now we begin to see." The session lasted for an hour. By the end, the 3 warriors were relaxed around Jake, asking him questions about Earth and humanity, sharing stories of their own world. When the time came to leave, Croth stood and placed one massive clawed hand on Jake's shoulder. "You have proven what you claimed, human. The bond is real. We will carry word of this to the High Council. The Vrexian people will enter formal alliance with Earth." Jake left the chamber to thunderous noise. Aliens from dozens of species were talking all at once, arguing, celebrating, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Katie rushed forward and hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she kept saying. "You actually did it." Commander Harris stood back, that knowing grin on his face. He caught Jake's eye and nodded once. A simple gesture that said everything. "Well done." In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Human volunteers flooded into the interspecies compatibility program. Species that had been considered impossible to work with suddenly found human partners willing and able to bridge the gap. Success rates skyrocketed across the board. Jake became a mentor, teaching other humans the principles he had learned: confidence without aggression, respect without submission. See the being behind the claws and fangs. Every lesson was built on humanity's ancient relationship with predators, reframed for a galactic stage. Scar remained Jake's partner. They worked together on diplomatic missions, proving again and again that the bond between them was genuine. Other Vrexians began seeking out human partners, and formal alliances were established between Earth and the Vrexian worlds. 6 months after that first meeting, Jake stood in the observation room watching a new group of volunteers enter their first sessions. Katie stood beside him, now working as a coordinator for the program. Commander Harris was there too, arms crossed, that same satisfied expression on his face.